Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Crossline Community Groups podcast. My name is Jordan Gash. I'm the community life pastor here at Crossline Church. And I have an exciting episode for you today. I have a dear friend, Adam Brown, with me, which I'm going to introduce in just a second. But before we even get started, I want to tell you what this whole podcast serves to do. This podcast is for anybody that's out there that's either a part of a small group, leading a small group, or maybe you're a small group's pastor. And we have conversations around the ministry of small groups and how to grow that, how to develop that, how to really be successful in that. And I do want to say that if you are any of those people, participant, leader, or pastor in this area, I just want to thank you for what you do. I want to affirm you in what you do. You are having kingdom impact. So thanks for stepping into that. But let's jump into the episode. We have a question that we are going to answer today with my friend Adam. And the question is, will a couples group ever be as close as a men's and women's group? And let me introduce my dear friend Adam Brown. He is the life groups pastor down at Harbor Point Christian Church. Not Christian Church, just Harbor Point Church.
Yeah, there you go.
And more so, he's been a friend of mine for a long, long time. And we've had the chance to do ministry together at the same church and just be friends for a long time.
Yeah.
So thanks, Adam, for having me.
Yeah.
For having you.
Yes.
I can even answer. See, that's why I'm not a podcaster. Thank
There you go.
Adam, for being with us.
Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, like you said, we've known each other for a long time. We got saved kind of close to each other at Coast Hills. And then we grew up together. We worked together, went to school together. So now we're doing similar jobs in two different parts of Orange County. So it's fun to be in contact and have a conversation with you and discuss this topic.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations on the phone or via text and saying, what the heck do I do now?
Yes,
right?
exactly.
What did you do? How do we move through
Exactly.
this? So like I said, Adam, we are going to be talking about, can a couples group be as close as a men's or women's group, or a mixed group be as close as a men's and women's group? And this all kind of was birthed out of an article I read. And the article had a lot of different things that it was saying about small groups. But one portion of it, the pastor that was writing it shared about this idea that he really believed that in the process of making disciples, that a couples group cannot be nearly as effective as a men's and women's group. He thought that it was actually close to impossible for a couples group to be as deep and as intimate and as strong as a men's and women's group, saying that men aren't going to open up with women and women aren't going to open up with men. And that's just not going to happen. So let's just cut that and walk away from that and just focus only on men's and women's group. And that's an opinion. And I was able to read it and hear his thoughts, but it definitely stirred some things within me because here at Crossline, and I'm sure at Harbor Point, we have both. We have men's and women's groups and we have couples groups. We have mixed groups and singles groups and a whole variety of different groups. So Adam, why do you think this pastor would even say something like that? What would lead somebody to even believe that a couples group can't be as close?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and the article is very interesting, and I think his take on small groups is definitely an honest one, and maybe even blunt at times. But I think it's easy for people in any situation, whether it be their daily life or something as specific as a small group that they're getting together, to kind of default into whatever is easy. And I think there's a tendency when you're kind of with your spouse or in a mixed group, and it doesn't feel maybe as focused as a men's or women's group, there's a tendency to kind of default into this maybe more of a social group or just a social gathering or something of that sort, because it's maybe not, when you get all men together, it's like we feel as men, okay, we have this agenda, we have this task ahead of us, we have this is the point of why we're getting together, or women naturally just have, when they get together, have the conversations that they tend to have. So it might feel like when it's a mixed group or when it's a couples group, there might be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more social setting, a little bit more in that context. So I think his initial kind of assessment of mixed groups or couples groups tend to default to more social side of things and just gather together because that's what they're quote unquote supposed to do, because that's what their church said to do, or their small groups pastor told them to do, that they should get together once a week and talk about the Bible and all that sort of stuff. So it's easy to default in that regard. But I don't think that is true for every group. I think you can stay the course and you can stay focused on what's at hand and continue to move forward in that regard, kind of no matter what the group might be.
And I do agree. I think that there is that default of going to the social aspect of it, and you're eating appetizers, you're playing games, you're just chatting with everybody, and it does, you know, you may have a 2-hour long group, and all of a sudden you're an hour in, you're like, wow, we haven't even talked about anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because we're socializing. And I think though that there's a sense of comfortability in the social environment, because there is elements of going deep requires something. It requires you to be open a little bit more, you know, to be a little bit more vulnerable in your identity. And there might be, you know, discomfort or embarrassment, you know, being amongst, maybe there's deep issues that you have as a woman, or deep issues that you have as a man. And like, man, I do not want to open up about that with someone else because of the opposite sex, because that's going to relieve me feeling bad. I don't want to feel like that. And I don't know if I want to go there. So there is this comfort in just like, let's just go to the social, and I'm doing what my pastor said. And I think so. I do think that there is this underlying sense of fear that sometimes drives the lack of depth in a couple's group.
Yeah.
And
well, I think it's the fear of what they're going to say tomorrow. Right. So what happens in the group when I share something vulnerable tonight?
Yeah.
Or vulnerable in my time together with my group, maybe in front of my spouse that maybe I haven't even shared with my spouse or my significant other. Yeah. And then I say it because I feel compelled, you know, by the Holy Spirit or whatever it may be, or the conversation, I share it and then my spouse is upset with me. Or tomorrow when I see my friends at the soccer game or the social setting or whatever it is, how are they gonna judge me, right? So it's almost this weird thinking about, okay, what are they gonna say next time I see them in that regard? So I think there's maybe a little bit more nuanced experience with a couples or a mixed group in that context. When we kind of get together with just the guys, there's bro code, and you know what happens at guys group stays at guys group or whatever, right. or maybe the same thing for women. So I think when it does get a little bit more mixed, it's harder to navigate in that context.
It's funny you say, Adam, like this idea of like things that you haven't even said to your spouse, especially like we're in the stage where we have young kids, and sometimes like it's like ships passing the night with my spouse, and you go have this time where you separate to have small group with the other couples, and you go to prayer requests, and then you like share something, and your wife gives you this eye like, what?
You're sharing that?
That happens so often. Like we talk about it later, but even to your point, it's like, what are these people going to think? But I've also thought personally, I think to myself, if I say this of something that I'm struggling with my wife, Alex, what is the other wife gonna think of me as a husband? And that goes into it too.
Yeah.
So I do think that there are some barriers and some challenges that come with a couples group that may not be there, you know, really with a men's and women's group. So let's jump into that a little bit, Adam. Clearly, we do have both in our churches. So what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of both sides, you know, of the men's group and women's group, or the mixed group and the couples group? Like what's the...
So I think about, you know, Jesus calls us to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? That's a wholeness idea. Every person, every part of who I am. So I have to think about myself as a whole person, and how then I am going to be shaped in the best way possible. So in certain areas of my life, and obviously they all overlap in a lot of different ways. I'm being shaped as a dad. I'm being shaped as a pastor, as a follower of Jesus, as a husband, as a man, as a employee. So all those things have to correlate with each other. So I think that there are pros and cons to each, because sometimes you know, I get to have conversations specific about my marriage or about myself in front of my wife in other couples groups. And then sometimes I have conversations where it's a totally different conversation where I'm just a dad or just a guy, having direct conversation in that regard. You know, one thing is interesting, in some of the groups that I've, you know, kind of helped grow through the ministry that I lead at Harbor Point, is for sometimes it's the first time a husband and wife have been in a group together. And it's the first time they're having the depth of spiritual conversations that they're having in the group. And we get spouses that walk out and go, I've never heard my husband talk that much or my wife talk that much. And I've never heard them talk about those topics. And I think it's just one of those things that maybe naturally at home, just because of the busyness of life or whatever it is, we don't quite get to those discussion points, but where in a group, it kind of changes the game a little bit in that regard. And I think it's a significant thing to kind of be shaped in my marriage and in my parenting context through the people that are in my couples group or mixed group or whatever it may be. But at the same time, I need that other side of the aspect as well. So I think I answered your question. I'm not entirely sure, but I got a little distracted there.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
No, what you're saying is so true, Adam. I think again, it's so much about where we're at in our life too, is for us, where you have young kids and we're in that season with our marriages, we're trying to navigate young kids, and now they're starting to even get into those preteen years and teen years and stuff. And so being able to walk with other people in that is so important, both sides, not just men and women, or just men or just women, but like the whole family, the family dynamic. And I think, kind of some of the things you were saying is I do believe that there is the bro code, and there's a way that you can get to a level of depth maybe faster with somebody that is, like you, right? And connected in that, same, age, same, gender, same, like that whole element. So being able to talk to just guys, I can go there faster because I feel like almost less likely to be judged maybe. And you just go that direction, and they talk like me, and I don't have to navigate how I'm even vocalizing things or communicating things. I could just say it because I feel like I'm talking to a guy, and even the topics I could talk about. We don't have to, with men and women, you don't have to waste time topping out longer topics. You could get right to let's talk specifically man topics, right? Specifically, to your point, dads, husbands, right?
Yeah.
You go that whole conversation. But you're right. I do think that there's a value. There's like a hidden treasure that I think is behind maybe some of the challenges of a couples group that you miss out on if you don't do that, if you don't step into that. I think that I've heard plenty of times where I've been sitting in a men's group and somebody's telling me a story, and it always comes off that he's always the good guy, right? In the situation, right? And you're like, yeah, man, I feel you. I'm with you, man.
Exactly.
I'm with you. We'll be praying for you.
Yeah.
But in the back of your mind, you're like, I wonder what his wife would say, right? Yeah. Or I wonder what his wife, how his wife would receive what he's saying right now. There's always kind of more to the story. And when you're in a couples group, you almost have that accountability to just speak the whole story.
Yeah.
Or if a story is spoken and it's not in line with what she thinks or what he thinks, they'll let you know. And there's maybe some strong fellowship that happens, right? And you work it out together as a group. And so I think that there's that benefit to it. And the last thing, I just think I think too, when you get married, and you know this, Adam, it's we're called to be one flesh now. It's not just Jordan, it's not just Adam anymore, but now it's us together. It's me and Alex, and we are one flesh. She is, my Ezer Conegdo, my helper suitable to help me in this journey of discipleship and growth and development as a follower of Christ. And so there's an element to me that goes, I want her to be a part of those discipleship moments that we don't always get all day long because, again, we're busy. And it's so the discipleship moments are precious. And I almost want her right next to me so that she could be hearing the same things that I'm hearing, receiving, right?
And the follow-up on that is that in the context of the small group, she gets to hear whatever that conversation is, whatever that discussion point is.
Yeah.
And she's literally the closest person to you. So proximity will dictate a lot of potential power and an opportunity to have influence. So she can continue to follow up on that. Yeah. You and I might be in a small group and we might go 3 or 4 days without texting each other. And then all of a sudden I'll think, oh my gosh, I should text Jordan and ask him how he's doing with that, whatever that topic was. Yeah. So I think there is a beauty that takes place when there is a couples group and a mixed group in that context. So, and I also just think, unfortunately, this is the reality of life these days. Kind of mixed groups and singles and couples and all these different stuff with the way the world is going. There are just a lot of different opportunities. It's not kind of this cute little wonderful boxes that everyone can fit in anymore. It's just a different context and a different understanding of how people get to be in community, in accountability, shaped by that process. And I think the picture we get of the body of Christ is everyone, from whatever background, whatever season of life, whatever situation, they get to be a part of that community, and they get to be shaped in the context of that group, whatever it may be. So I remember, I think we might have even read, I'll quote Doug Fields for a second, but he wrote Your First 2 Years in Youth Ministry. And I remember in the book, he said,
book.
like, you need...
Lifesaver.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug.
But I remember there was a section that was like, you need a certain series of people in your life that you can have conversation with on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Someone within the church that understands your context of ministry, that understands what you're going through, someone that's in ministry, but maybe at another church that is doing a similar job to you. And then someone that is just a friend that has no idea what it means to be a pastor. And obviously he's talking as, young youth pastors that are kind of figuring out what it means. But I think about that in my own life a lot, because I think I have relationships that my wife and I have together as we grow and do life with our kids and do life with people we know. You and I occasionally get together and we'll have lunch or coffee or whatever it is. We go, how's it going? How's life? But I have another pastor friend of mine. He's almost doing the same exact job as me, similar to you and I. He's got young kids, and we get together pretty much once a week and just talk life. Yeah. Right. So is that a small group of sorts? Maybe not. It's a very, very small group. But to the point that was made in the book was I need these different relationships in my life to have different types of conversations to shape me in unique ways that I might not know that I need. But as I submit myself to the group and submit myself to the process of being shaped, the different groups that I'm a part of and the different relationships I have shape the different aspects of who I am and help me, continue to become more and more like Christ in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's really where we're going, even in this conversation, is this idea of there is this beauty to the diversified experience, right?
Sure.
That you have, right? It doesn't have to be one thing or the other. There is beauty in both. And if there's opportunity for you to have both, whether it's, I'm not saying that you have to go to the men's breakfast and have a couples group, and maybe that your schedule doesn't allow for that, but maybe there is that guy that you connect with regularly, once a month, and it's just like you connect, and how's life? Connect through those things. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe there's a couples group that you meet with, and it's a social group that you guys come together, but you spend a couple hours together and you really pray together. And so there is this beauty in the diversified experience. A follow-up question from something we said earlier, Adam, that I was going to ask you is, like, do you ever feel like, you've been in a small group and there's maybe something that you and Jen is his awesome wife, and has been launched into a conversation that you maybe didn't know you needed to have based off of the conversation that happened at small group? Like, yeah, sure.
I mean, I think like you said, like maybe you say something, or you're just, I'm a very much a verbal processor. So I'm talking out loud, often, I've had a busy day. So by the time I get to small group, I'm kind of like, this is my chance to kind of just process. So it's a variety of ways that it happens. Either I say stuff that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I fully understand what I just said, or gosh, I don't know if that's a conversation I should have probably had with my wife before we had that. Yeah. Or I think one of the beauties of a small group, and I think this can happen in any kind of variations of small group, is that you get launched into it because you're watching other people attempt to live the same life you are. Yeah. And that's the beauty of the small group, is we get to kind of, everyone aims their life at Jesus and take steps closer to him. And we're not perfect. We say this all the time at Harbor Point. We're not perfect. We don't have it all together. We're aiming our lives at Jesus and continuing to take steps towards him. Yeah. And we need each other to do it. Yeah. We need each other to go through that. So I've sat around the table and gone, oh my gosh, like that person's being really vulnerable right now. Yeah. And they're actually saying things that I think if I was maybe a little bit stronger in my, my attitude at this moment, or a little bolder in my own faith, or courageous, maybe I would be saying the same things. Yeah. But I'm definitely going to have a follow-up conversation with my spouse after this discussion, whatever it may be, because it's bringing to the surface things that I didn't know I needed to process. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of the small group,
yeah.
of the other ones in the group that are doing that and exposing that conversation in that
Yeah.
regard.
Totally agree with all those things, and can definitely relate to those post group conversations
Yes.
that we like to have. But we usually get out. Problem is, my wife goes to bed so early. It's like
Yes.
we get out of group so late, and I'm all like, man, there's so many things I want to talk about. But my wife is out by the time we get home. It's like,
all right,
I'll have to hold on
write
to
you a
that until
letter.
tomorrow.
Exactly.
So I have to write it down in my journal and talk about it the next day. And anyways, so Adam, you're leading obviously life groups down at Harbor Point. I think in this conversation we have to kind of address maybe what's the bigger strategy of life groups? Maybe for most of us that are listening here, I would say a lot of the people that are listening are connected to Crossline. I know that we have listeners out there that are not, but for Harbor Point, maybe you can articulate what is the ultimate goal and strategy of groups, like life groups for you, as you communicate to your leadership team or communicate to a new host or a new leader, what are you telling them is the ultimate goal and desire for you as the
I think it's a really good question. I mean we probably could do a whole different podcast just on that topic alone. But I think when I think about it, I think about the real life conversations that I'm having with people, which are just this last week. I met with 2 different life groups that I simply said, tell me about your life group. And they described for 30 minutes, everyone in their life group.
Yeah.
And everyone is going through really, really hard life situations.
Yeah.
Single mom, illnesses, divorces, unruly children, loss of job. And for me, the life group, I think one of the big things is it helps us find creative ways to be shaped by God's word, God's Holy Spirit through the people we're in conversation with. But it is that opportunity to rely on the people around us when we have the moments that are the really, really hard moments. In addition, it's those moments that we get to celebrate together. It's those people that we get to do. We call them life groups because we're doing life together and going through that. And one of the leaders said to me, it's been really hard. Everyone's got a lot going on. Kind of our attendance has been sporadic here and there. And I said, okay, keep going because this is when your group needs you the most as the leader and for the rest of the group to be there because this is when your group is really going to, put rubber to the road or proof in the pudding or whatever phrase you want to use. This is when you guys get to rise up and stand up and be that support to the other person in your group that can help you walk in that regard. And that's, I think, the picture of the body of Christ. And you and I, as pastors, we have very similar personalities. We want to care for everyone, call everyone back, take a meal to everyone's houses, and be there in every single moment. We can't do that. Yeah. And it's the small group, the life group that gets to step into those moments and care for people and shepherd them and help them be God's presence and be there and show the care that they need in those moments of joy and happiness and pain and sorrow and stand in the gap in those moments. So I think it's a great way we get shaped and become more and more like Jesus. But I think even more so as I'm just thinking about this because of this conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks, it's in those times of need, that's where I turn. Yeah. I turn to my small group or my life group to really have the strength to continue to keep moving forward.
It's good. You're pretty smart.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
It's a good pastor. I think kind of where we want to land on this, you guys, is because again, most people listening are small group leaders, kind of maybe trying to glean some advice and wisdom on what to do. And maybe you're considering leading a small group and you're like, well, what should I do? Should I step into leading a men's group or a women's group, or should I do the couples group? And I think that's a decision that you ultimately need to make. But what I would say is don't be afraid of the potential scary parts of a couples group. And I do think that if you are willing to kind of try to step into that, if that's something that's where you're at in your life and your spouse is with you in that, I think that's important too as well, what we haven't addressed. You want to be in this together. Right? You don't want to lead a small group and have your spouse just be not for it at all, right? Sure. That might be a good one to do a men's or women's group. Yeah, exactly. But if your spouse is with you, to take that bold move to step into it, I think Jesus had his group of guys, right? He had the disciples and he was pouring into them. But I think so much of his ministry on the road had everyone. I mean, I even pulled up some scriptures just around this, just to remind us that men and women were both there. Husbands and wives were there. Families were there. 1 Corinthians 9:5, right? That Peter had a wife, and it says, don't we have the right to bring a believing wife with us as the other apostles and brothers do? So there is an element that the wife and maybe the kids, they were rolling with Peter and rolling with them, and they're on the journey. And so even the process of learning and developing was there. You know, Jesus talks about in Luke 8 and talks about that he was traveling from village to village, and there were the disciples, but then there was all these women too that were right there with them, walking with them together, hearing all the same messages that Jesus was giving. Yes, maybe there was these deeper conversations that he had with this select few, but there was all those same teachings and togetherness. And then even as you step into Acts chapter 2, it says they were meeting in their homes, breaking bread in their homes. Well, what's in homes? Families, right?
Exactly.
Families are in. I'm sure there are kids just like our homes, right? There's kids running across. There's things flying all over the place. There's things breaking, and families kind of having to jump into that. So it was in the midst of that early church, and it was in the midst of what Jesus was doing. So what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to step into that because you don't think that you're going to be able to go as deep. Yes, it may be easier to go men's and women's group, because again, you just jump right into it, maybe you get closer, but I think that there is so much there in a couples group to that, what me and Adam have been talking about, some that can help you in your marriage and your development if you're willing to as a leader to lead them past that social aspect, right? Exactly. You said it's the default to the social, and what the guy said in the article, it's just they all default to the social, and so you can't really even get growth. It's up to you as a leader, and maybe you're a small group pastor listening. It's up to you to help coach them and lead them past. This is just not social. We want to actually get into those topics and those discussions. But
yeah, I think, you make a great point about homes and kids. And I heard a pastor once say, the greatest pulpit you have is the kitchen table. Yeah. And that's more of a family, parenting conversation. Yeah. But, I know as my wife and I have participated in relationships, it's sometimes difficult to find people. You and I both have 3 boys. We added a 4th baby girl at the end.
The wild card.
Who would do that? But it's hard sometimes to find people that kind of run at the same speed your kids do. Yeah. But when you do find those people, and you get to build those relationships, and I think that can happen through a couples group or, kind of a family group together. There's a wonderful benefit that takes place where my kids get another male figure and another female figure of someone else that's following Jesus. They get almost I know a long time ago at the other church we were at, there was a group that was dads and sons, and they kind of used this term that it was all like, all the dads were all dads to all the sons, and all the sons were all sons to all the dads. Yeah. So at any point, any one of the sons could call one of the dads and go, "Hey, I'm struggling with this, but I didn't want to call my dad about it, so I'm calling you." Yeah. Right. So there's this wonderful benefit that takes place when we kind of cross contaminate or get kids in the same room with other kids. I love this story. When Jesus gets lost in the temple, it says that Mary and Joseph assumed that Jesus was with other relatives, right? With someone else earlier in the pack. And then they find out 3 days later that he's at the temple. They're like, "Oh, we got to go back." And then Jesus as a 12-year-old has a sassy comment back. Like, it's one of my favorite stories, but I love the assumption in there that they thought, "Oh, he's with someone else we trust." Yeah. And I think there's a wonderful picture when it comes to small groups and life groups that you get this mutual benefit of seeing other dads and other parents. And I get to watch you as a parent and a dad and go, "Oh, how did you navigate that with your 10-year-old that's talking back to you? Or how did you navigate that with your 3-year-old that's throwing a fit right now?" In front of the context of other people, I get to be exposed to that and watch that at the same time. So there's a wonderful benefit that takes place in that regard as well. Yeah.
Well, I know your kids, my kids. I think it's very clear that we reap what we sow.
Yes, exactly.
And it certainly takes a village to raise my children.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm thankful for my small group and those multiple dads and other multiple moms, right, that are part of that. But Adam Brown is an amazing pastor down at Harbor Point. That's in San Juan Capistrano, if in the Dana Point area as well. All that to say, if you guys are looking for a church, if you guys are looking to connect with a great church that's down in that area, I know Harper Point is an amazing church. I know a lot of people there and know some great pastors there as well. We are going to wrap this up. I hope you guys are encouraged today. Maybe you take some thoughts, conversation points for you and your spouse to kind of go into that. And then I would even apply this. We talked a lot about spouses. I do want to say there is some of these elements of the mixed viewpoints and even the greater growth, even in mixed singles groups too.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, yes, they're not your spouse. You're not going home with that person. Hopefully not. Right? But you have that opportunity. Wow, that came out loud. Things I say out loud. But those are also opportunities that you can grow together. But Adam, thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up and bless these people going out?
Yeah, I was chatting with one of our life group leaders maybe 6 months ago or so, and they just said they defined success in their small group as we just kept meeting, right? We kept meeting. And I thought it was a significant statement because it's so easy just to kind of give up.
Yeah.
Just kind of throw in the towel. I can't figure out the schedule. It's not working out, or I don't like the book we're doing, or I'm not too fond of the curriculum, and they just give up. And in that, you kind of isolate. And I thought that the continue to get together, right? That's a scriptural statement. Don't give up meeting together.
Yeah.
So the continue to meet together, continue to find ways to put yourself in community, find ways to let yourself be shaped by other people around you that you trust, that know the Lord as well, that you can, are confident that they have a head on their shoulders, and continue to be a part of some sort of group in some form or fashion, Amen. Whatever it may be, in the mix. So
awesome. Love it. Well, as we close these things out, what we do, as we always close, is we just want to bless you. We're pastors and we want to bless the people that are out there doing the work of the ministry out there. So if you guys would even just receive this blessing wherever you are right now today, whether it's early in the morning, it's late at night, or sometime in the middle, and you're just kind of maybe busy in your day, just take a break for just a moment and just receive this blessing from us. And it comes from Philippians chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. It just says, "And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with all the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. Amen." We love you guys. You guys are doing great work. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much, Adam.
Yeah.